Hi, my name is S.A.HODDER and welcome to this third class of Introduction to DSLR Photography. Today we're going to be combining what we've learned over the last couple of lessons with first week being our shutter speed and understanding how the shutter speed works and what effect it has on our pictures. The second class we covered aperture and what aperture does, and again how you can utilize this for different types of pictures that you're taking. And today we're going to combine them all together and throw in some extra tools available to you for when you want to go and capture some pictures and take some pictures. Especially it gives you more creativity, options for when you're out taking pictures to get the pictures you really desire. So get your camera ready and we'll go through it because you're going to need it for seeing what it is I'm talking about in the different settings. So when you switch to manual, different options happen on your camera and are available to you on your camera. And one of those is that you now have the chance to control what's called your ISO. And the ISO can be found different places on your camera. On this 70D, it's a button right up here. When I press on that, it then changes the camera back screen, so I can then go between the ISO. Now, what is an ISO and how does it actually work and what does it do? Well, back in the day we used to buy film and they would only run in ranges from a 100 ISO, 200 ISO, 400 ISO, 800 ISO, and 1600 ISO. Now, what is an ISO and what does it do? Well, it indicates the light sensitivity of the film. So when film is at a 100 ISO, means that it needs more light. It is less light sensitive. So to be able to capture pictures, you need a lot more light than normal. So this film, back in when I started taking pictures, was always used for outdoor photography, like in the sunshine or any kind of outdoor photography I was trying to do during the daytime, because it kept it more light sensitive. It gave a little bit more popping to your coloring while doing this. 200 ISO was then the one that was an all-rounds that you could use both for indoors and outdoors, but mainly outdoors. So it was one of those that you would use if you weren't quite sure where you were going to be taking pictures. 400 ISO was then more dictated for indoor photography. So if you're going to a party or a birthday party or taking pictures around the house or anything like that, because the film was more light sensitive, and that means it can operate and give you speeds that you can use in lower light situations. 800 then lets you take pictures in even darker rooms or darkened places and maintaining a good shutter speed when you're taking your pictures. And this is what you'll find when you start taking pictures, let's say of sports or anything like that. Like the local hockey rink here has very poor lighting. So when you want to take pictures at those facilities, well, then you might have to increase your ISO to ensure that you then get a good shutter speed on your camera. 1600 again allows you to go even to darker situations, and a lot of people tend to start using these for high contrast black and white pictures, but also to if you're taking pictures of the stars. Because the sensor has to become more sensitive to the light and be able to absorb all the small little dots in the sky. And you can try this by taking on a clear night, putting your camera on an ISO 100, 400 and 1600 just to see the differences with the same shutter speed of what actually comes out on your pictures, and you'll see a huge difference in that. Now cameras now too, they go to 3200 ISO, and this lets you take even more detailing in the night sky or in darker situations. I like using this one here when I want to capture the Milky Way because it picks up the cloud that it is within the Milky Way, so which is really good. Then you can go to 6400 ISO, which again lets you take pictures in even lower light situations. And cameras now are getting better and better and better and increasing the ISO, but also increasing the quality of the sensor to absorb the ISO with limited amount of noise. And noise comes from when it then starts going grainy or pixelaty or anything like that, because the sensor is not able to distinguish between the different gray tones in, if it's a night sky or anything else that you're doing. So it can look this a little bit more grungy looking. Okay. The next step then you want to look at is then, well, how do you use this together with your shutter speed and your aperture? Well, there's two different tools that you use. One is called a exposure triangle. And what the exposure triangle is, when you use the three different settings on the camera to control the outcome based on what it is that you're trying to take a picture of. So you have your f-stop or your aperture, which you know now is controlling the amount of light that comes in, but also the depth of field and the clarity within your picture. The next one you have is then your shutter speed, which then controls how fast the shutter opens and closes. So remember, if you're doing night photography or light trails or anything like that, well then you want a longer shutter speed. If you're capturing sports or wildlife, well then you want a faster shutter speed. Now sometimes the situation doesn't allow you, let's say if you're taking a picture, to get a fast enough shutter speed if you're on a lower ISO rate. So this is where the ISO comes in. And a lot of times the ISO becomes your wild card. And yes, just like in poker, the wild card means that it gives you chance for changing the settings and giving you the settings that you need for capturing a specific picture. So if you're at a hockey rink, let's say, and you want to be able to have a faster shutter speed of, let's say, 1/500, well, first you have to look at the lighting and the lens that you have there. When you're taking a picture of somebody, let's say, in a hockey game, you really don't care about the depth of field because you don't really care about what's in the background of the skaters, what it says on the billboards or anything like that there. So you can set your f-stop on the lowest f-stop available, so let's just say an f4. If you have a 70-200 f4, well, this will let you then do this. Now, how do you know then if you're able to shoot at that speed and be able to get a properly lit picture? So you have the right lighting there so it doesn't get underexposed. Well, in the bottom of your viewfinder, there is an indicator that looks like this. And this is your light meter. And what the light meter does, it lets you know if your picture is overexposed or underexposed. By being overexposed means that you're having too much light come in. Okay? By being underexposed means that there's not enough light coming in. So this is very important to remember when you are taking pictures, because if you're overexposed and your indicator, and it's in the little viewfinder or on the back of the screen of your camera that shows right here, if this is too far up in the plus size, it becomes too overexposed, and that means it becomes more light. The problem with if it goes to being way overexposed is that your pictures become white, and that means that the white is non-recoverable when you go to edit your pictures. And the other way, when you go down to -2 or below, some cameras have down to a -5, what that means is that it's severely underexposed if you go there, and that means enough light was not coming in. So what you do is, if you're taking a picture at the hockey rink and you're using a faster shutter speed of 1/500th of a second with an aperture f4, well, in the bottom of the camera there's an indicator that will run on the bottom here. And what you want to try to do is to have your indicator somewhere around 0. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly on 0. It can be a little bit over or it can be a little bit under. But it gives you the variance then for seeing when you're pointing at hockey players, if your indicator is, let's say, way down here, well, this means that you need to change your ISO. So if you're on a 100 ISO and your indicator is at -2, well, for every step you go up, so for every full ISO you go up, is equivalent to the one full section here. So it then increases and gives you the opportunity for letting in more light and to getting the shutter speed that you need. So if you're at an ISO 100 and then when you put your camera to ISO 400, what that will equate to is that your indicator might move from -2 to 0. And this then ensures that you have the shutter speed that's good enough for taking your picture. So when you're taking a picture like this, your priority is your ISO, not your aperture and not your ISO. It's controlling the shutter speed to be able to capture the picture of the hockey player or the figure skater or anybody like that that you want to capture. Okay? The same thing goes, let's say, if you are trying to take a picture, a portrait of somebody. Well, you might be at an ISO 100, which is great because most portraits you want to be able to blow up to larger sizes. So your biggest thing is then the lensing that you have on. So let's stay with the same f4 that we have for the portrait. But we do not need this aperture of, or the shutter speed of 1/500th of a second because it's just a portrait. So what you can do then is that with doing this you will see that your indicator is right down here because of that. So, and that's because of you have it on ISO 100. So what you do is for every 3 notches again that go here will reduce a full shutter speed. So if you're at 500, 3 clicks will bring it to 1/250. 3 additional clicks will then bring it to 1/125, which is a great shutter speed for a portrait. So, but by doing this, what it'll do is it'll let more light in, and you'll see your indicator and the light meter inside the viewfinder go towards 0. Now, the biggest thing to remember when you're doing this is where you point your camera, because inside of the camera you will have different dots, and they might look like this here. And the biggest thing to remember is that your light meter is controlled by the sensor. Okay, so that's why every time you move your camera, and if you try it now and just pointing up towards some light and away from light, you will see this indicator go back and forth. And that's simply because of that center spot is then reading the light based on where you're pointing the camera. So the biggest thing to have your camera on is put it onto a spot meter. One, because if you're going to be taking a picture of a person and a portrait, let's say like the ones I have over here, well, I ought to focus on the cheek or on the bridge of the nose right here. And by doing this, it then lets me ensure that the person will stay in focus with an f4. Okay? And also, it doesn't matter then with the lighting around. So as long as you have the subject focused on and your light meter set to somewhere around 0, you will get a good picture. It might be dark in the background, which can look awesome. It might be light in the background. But the biggest thing is to ensure that the object and the subject that you're taking a picture of is where you set your settings, and make sure. Now, you don't always have to go with exactly at a 0, because when I do landscapes, for instance, well, I want my ISO to be at 100, because again, I want to be able to blow it up. I want a large depth of field, so instead of having an f4, I will have an f16. My wildcard when taking this picture then becomes my shutter speed. And because I really don't care with what my shutter speed is, because when you're taking landscapes, it's only nature that's moving. So it doesn't really matter if I have it on 125th of a second, or if I have it slower. But that becomes my my wild card for when I'm taking a picture of a landscape. The second thing then is, I don't want my indicator or my light meter to be exactly at 0. because I like to give the colors and in my pictures a pop. So what I'll actually do is, on purposely, I will take my pictures at -1. By underexposing my landscapes, I get a pop in the coloring of my of the sky. I get more contrasting in the clouds. You'll see that in some of the pictures I'm going to show you shortly. But this is how you then control the shutter speed for that. And like I say, understanding your light meter and the exposure triangle and using the ISO to your advantage to get the settings right, and it gives you more flexibility and more creativity with your pictures when you want to try to take pictures and go out and do stuff. So please go out, practice this, and have fun with it. So let's take a look at a couple different pictures. Let me explain to you what I did and how I took these, because it makes a huge difference in the different types of pictures that you're taking. So in this first one here, which is of a sunset in the winter time that I took, I focused on the bridge over to the right hand side, and by doing this, this is where my focal point will start. I set my camera on f16 because I wanted the large depth of field within the picture, because I want the ice to be clear and the hills in the background. And also my light meter I did not have at 0. I had it at -1, and this was to ensure that the orange will be popping and the blue will be popping in the sky with this. So this is the effect that you get by underexposing, especially when you're doing landscapes. The next picture I have here is just to show a little bit of difference, is a rose. And the rose that I took it on the f2.8 because I wanted to be close, but I want this narrow depth of field within the picture. And to do this, I then focused on it at f2.8. My shutter speed wasn't really a big thing because of the fact of it was light outside, and my ISO again I kept at 100. So by doing this, it eliminates the amounts of light that comes in. This one here I also did at a -1 because I wanted the red pinkish to pop within the picture. The next one here I took indoors of Elvis Stoiko at the local civic center here. And this one was a little bit more challenged because he was skating. He's a fast skater. He moves fast. So to this, my main goal was then to have a faster shutter speed. And to ensure that I got that, I had to be running at an ISO of 1600. My depth of field, I had it on my smallest aperture that was available on the lens I had, and then I just had to go by my shutter speed and adjust my ISO. And this is why the 1600. But because of the camera, you can see that the graining is not too bad in the picture itself. Sunsets is one of my favorite things that I like taking pictures of, especially because we have so many different things. This is why in the fourth picture I have here is down at Bottle Cove, and this I actually pointed directly at the shoreline, just where you see a little bit of water in between the rocks on the beach. Again, because I wanted this huge depth of field within the picture and to capture the colors at the sunset. And again, with this one I was at an f16, ISO 100, but my shutter speed I had then extended because of the fact of it was getting low. And for this one here I was actually running at I believe it was 5 seconds to get this one. And then my last one here is just shows you it's not all about sunsets. It can be at the daytime too. This one was taken on a country road in Denmark, where I focused on the tree, the first tree, and then I had again my aperture at f16 because I wanted this popping of the yellow of the feel of the mustard plants. And by doing this, I then, by underexposing, by having it at -1, it gives me then this great big pop of yellow and green and blue in the sky, and it gives a great contrasting to the clouds that are coming there. And so this is just some of the things to remember when you are taking your landscapes, is underexpose and try to have a little bit of fun with it. So now to finish off this class, what I want to do is I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to try and go out and take some pictures and use your light meter to the fullest of its capacity. To do this, I want you to go out and take a landscape picture of if it's a sunset, or if it's of icebergs, or if it's a landscape or whatever. And I want you to use the light meter in the camera. But to do this, what I want you to do is take 3 pictures and have one of them with your light meter at 0, and then the next one I want you to take so the light meter will be at +1, and then the last one I want you to take at a -1. And this is just so you can see again the differences it does in the picture when you actually have this control over the camera, and by using the light meter and the plus and minus to your advantage when taking a picture, and you can see what it does within the picture. Next, what you can do is that you can then try it on a portrait. Again, do the same thing. Set your light meter, focus on the person's face, if it's on a cheek or on the bridge of the nose, and then again do one at 0, one at +1, and one at -1, and just see. Now remember with this is that keep an eye on your shutter speed, keep an eye on the aperture. When you're doing the portrait, you don't have to go to a large number on the aperture. You can go with a smaller number, so an f2.8, an f4, or anything like that. The landscape, try to focus on an f16, and then just control your shutter speed on that. So but have fun with it. Come back and see me again next week, when we'll be talking more about framing of your pictures and how to set up your pictures. This will be the 4th class of my introductions to DSLR. Have a great day, and keep snapping and have fun. Bye.